election panel lineup features 0 politicians. There are no candidates on stage tonight, so you can all relax. Nobody up here is asking you for anything. Instead, we've decided to highlight what women need from the next government. Tonight we will hear not from politicians telling the party line, but from independent experts. Women with lived experiences of systemic issues, researchers, and those working and volunteering in the community. This way we will find out what is really happening for women in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We hope these discussions will inform your conversations with friends and families, your vote, and who knows, maybe even with politicians. And we hope it will also help inform your advocacy for women after the election, no matter who is in charge. As women, we are, of course, an extremely diverse demographic, facing different intersectional burdens and levels of systemic oppression. And our panellists will be talking to some of those issues tonight. Even when a particular type of discrimination doesn't seem to affect us directly as individuals, at the Auckland Women's Centre, we believe our strength lies in solidarity, lifting each other up and supporting one another as women. So thank you. Thank you for your interest, thank you for your support and solidarity, and thank you for coming out tonight to hear about the important issues facing us all. We have curated what promises to be a lively panel, full of smarts and humour, passion and anger, ably chaired by one of New Zealand's leading journalists, Alison Moore. Ali, I would like to take this opportunity also to publicly thank you for your work for women over many years, highlighting sexism and sexual harassment in New Zealand workplaces and elsewhere. And thank you for your Me Too project and your contributions as a Stuff and Sunday Star Times senior journalist and opinion writer. We're in good hands. Thank you.
Ko Annual Toko Ingoa, Moreira, Tina Koto, Tina Tato Katoa. Welcome everyone. I think this is a fantastic turnout in the middle of this brutal Tamaki Makaurau winter. And I thank you so much for coming out tonight in a very brief break in this endless rain. This is a very important conversation at a crucial time. It's less than 100 days until the general election. And I'd like to thank deeply the Auckland Women's Centre for bringing us together tonight. We have a wonderful panel of experts. We're going to hear from them individually for a few minutes each, and then I'm going to facilitate a conversation between us all. After that, at 8:30, there will be a very short break, just 5 minutes or so that you can fill in the forms you should have found on your chair. You all got those? Great, and you'll be able to write down your katai, the questions that you have for a question and answer session for the rest of the evening. And considering this very engaged audience we have here tonight, there's likely to be a lot of those, so I say we jump right in. I will introduce each speaker more fully before they speak, but welcome tonight, and thank you so much for your mahi, Zoe, Agnes, Mary, Jennifer, and Dr. Alright, first up, giving us some wisdom on policies for Wākini Māori, we have Zoe Arahawa-Hawk, who whakapapas to Ngāti Hako and Ngāti Paoa. Zoe has been a leader in Māori public health for 20 years in areas including, but not limited to, harm prevention, mental health, and well child tamariki order. She currently serves on the Iwi Māori Partnership Board for South Auckland for Te Aka Whai Ora, the Māori Health Authority, and she is the Chief Executive of E Tipu E Rea Whānau Services, which has its roots here at the Auckland Women's Centre more than a decade ago. The services work with rangatāngi who have kepi or who are hapu. Those are young parents and young people who are about to be parents, and the organisation uses a kaupapa Māori framework to uphold the mana of young parents. Welcome,
I haven't sat down all day, so sitting down was really nice. Calm for a moment. Kia ora koutou, it's really nice to see out tonight in this cold weather. You braved it. Thank you for being here. It shows your interest in this kaupapa. And I hope we can stimulate your thinking in regards to, who you vote for. So, as Alison said, and I'm really impressed with the searching you did for my bio. I am Ngāti Haka Ngāti Paoa, and the service that I am the CEO of is actually a Ngāti Paoa organisation. And for those that don't know where Ngāti Paoa is, because I always get the opportunity to talk about the whenua that is Kamaki Makaurau. Ngāti Paoa goes from actually Mahirangi all the way down Awataha, Takapuna, Devonport, through the islands and the Hauraki Gulf to Kohimarama down East Auckland and down to Hauraki and Koromē. So that's our whenua. And our office, one of our offices is based in Pamela, which is the heartlands of Ngāti Paoa. And yes, I just also want to acknowledge that we came from the Women's Centre. So it was identified about 12, 13 years ago that there was a real need to support young mama. Unfortunately, things haven't changed. And I think that is where I'm going to talk from in regards to the whānau that we work with, the wahine that we work with. And so this is young women, some as young as 13 who are hapu, up to about 26. And we support them on a journey through their haputanga and through their parenting journey. Now, unfortunately, and I will talk to my mother too, and this is why I do this, Mahi. She was a young mother herself, and she also was is care experienced. And because of her experience with Oranga Tamariki, SIFS, or whatever it was called back then, when she was hapu, when she was 16, the state automatically decided that my mother was unfit because of her experience in here to be a mother herself. This has not changed either. So today we still fight the system, fight Oranga Tamariki in regards to actually giving our young mamas a chance. The discrimination, the judgment and the racism is still strong. And our young whānau, they hide away because of it. They have to often beg for the young parent payment, and then if they do get it, it's a week or 2 weeks after baby is born. So they are often without a home, being judged already, ordering somebody knocking on the door, and they continue, I guess, to hide in shame because of what society is telling them about who they are, and that their decisions are their fault, and therefore they can't get the young parent payment. They have to beg for it because they don't deserve it. Now you would think this sort of attitude doesn't exist anymore, but I can tell you it does. Even they have to have a parent payment card, so when they go to the supermarket, this is from WINS, they actually have to go and show their card and use that to pay for kai or nappies. They aren't allowed to buy a whole lot of things listed. All the things they can buy are listed, and anything outside of it they can't buy. And that list is not substantial. So again, they're not trusted. It's a punitive system that is telling our young mamas that what they have done is wrong. And yet we are supposed to care about our future generations, our tamariki, and our young people. So I guess I'm asking everybody here to be aware of these issues, that they still exist. I'm exhausted today from fighting some of the issues that I've talked about today. And it's often like that every day. We exist because of them. And we need your support to vote for the right party to create change for our young family. We do hope we're not here in 3 years saying the same thing. We rely on We want you, if you have the opportunity, to have a say for our young people and stand up for them and their parents. So I don't know what time I'm at. We had like 8 minutes. 3 more minutes. I often, in our work, we get to celebrate some good stuff too. So I'm going to leave with a positive note because I don't want negativity to kind of rule your hearts tonight. We, through our support, and we need more services like ours out there across the Milton, we see some amazing things happen for our young mama and our papa in their community. We employ our young mamas, we see them thrive in the workplace. We see young mamas who didn't have a home get a home. We see them thrive in that home, be amazing parents, celebrate also their culture, their traditional parenting methods. Be strong about their identity and walk out there proud and do some amazing stuff with their life, just like my mama did, because someone believed in them. We need more of those organisations, so I guess I'm saying to you too, to encourage funding, to encourage people to support organisations like ourselves. There are a whole lot of young mamas and papas who aren't getting the support up and down the water, and they need it. So please, think about who you're waiting for in this space and create some change. Kia ora.
Right, next I'm going to call on Agnes, sharing her insights on what the needs of Pasifika women, and separately to empower women who are receiving income support is Agnes Margaret, who is chair of advocacy group Orphan Action Against Poverty. AAAP, you may be well aware of it, calls for the rights of all people, including the dispossessed and the disenfranchised. And Agnes was most recently in the news last month for disrupting an Auckland Council budget meeting, along with her colleague Stanley, to protest the council cuts and airport share sales. It's great to have you with us tonight, Agnes. I'm really looking forward to your korero. And Agnes is with us in difficult personal circumstances, so we're really, really super happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's such a great honour to be here tonight. First of all, I'd just like to extend my thanks to Naomi and also to Caitlin in the Auckland Women's Centre for organising this, and also to my fellow peers on stage with me. Oh, don't we feel special tonight? You know, not having the MPs, but having us here on stage. Honestly, that makes me feel really special tonight. So thank you, and I'd also like to thank each and every one of you for being here. It is so obvious to me tonight that there's a great need, for a lot of things to change, and that's what's all brought us here tonight. So I'm just going to give a little spiel about, what I do at AAAP and the people that we serve, especially our women and our children. So the wonderful our host, thank you as well, Alison. It's been a great honour to meet you personally. I love you and work, but also to have you here to listen. And also to be a part of this, I'm very honoured, greatly. Thank you. My name is Agnes Margaret, and I am a proud speaker, Samoan, New Zealand born woman. I was born and raised in Otara, in South Auckland, and where I come from, it's absolutely normal to have 10, 15 people living in your household. I come from a family that thrive on love, solidarity. If people in my family are struggling and in need, with whatever little we have, we give. Neighbours that need help in our small little community, low economic communities like Otara, we go around and pass coffee and sugar to our neighbours, because that's what we do when we're down and out. Unfortunately, it's not all bright and it's not all happy where I come from. We're faced with real challenges, and our reality isn't as bright, to be honest, as everybody else is. So before I get into the challenges, I'd just like to speak a little bit about the community that I come from. As some of you are aware, in South Auckland come the greatest Pasifika world rugby players, international rugby players, also sports people, women in sports, New Zealand Pasifika women mainly, rugby league, netball. I can go on and on and on about the successes of Pasifika women out there that come from our small communities, which is not really highlighted, to be honest. But tonight, that's why I'm here. I'm here to highlight all those positive things that have come out of our communities. Because at the moment, as you probably already know, they're painting a really bad picture of the community that I come from. And I want that to stop, because that's not what it's about in South Auckland. We are a community based on love and solidarity, as I keep saying before. This government and the system has made it quite impossible for us mothers, Pasifika mothers, women, to even try and reach our goals to the fullest of our potentials. Challenges that we face are things like having no money. Poverty is a huge driver in the challenges that we face. Poverty leads to mums having to stress out, having to worry about how they're going to pay their rent, how are they going to be able, especially women on the benefit, how are they going to pay their power, how are they going to be able to put food on their table for their children, how are they going to get them to school. Those are basic essential needs that women shouldn't have to really worry about if the system and the government was to offer them a little bit more support. They go on and on about our children eating 5 plus a day. We can't even afford to get vegetables and fruits.
That's right.
They cost an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
You know? So those are the challenges that we are facing. And it's just only a little bit of what I'm going to touch base on, because everything ties in together. Now, when you're faced with those challenges, if you're in a relationship, money issues are huge. It causes relationship breakdowns. And then mostly what happens to women after that, they don't have any support network systems out there to turn to. So they turn to either abuse substance, okay, or gambling, or, run everything high on debt, because that's the only option that they think that they have out there. Some even turn to selling themselves to be able to put food on the table. That's the reality of the world that I come from. That's the reality of the community that I live in. And that's the reality of what women have to do to be able to survive and put food on their kids' tables. A lot of families in South Auckland, I'm not going to lie, yes, they're broken, but it's because of this broken system. We don't come broken for nothing, we come from loving families. Our parents teach us right from wrong, right from when we're little, but when we're faced with challenges, we end up making decisions that are not really good for us, that don't suit us. And those decisions lead to women being punished and criminalised just for trying to survive. And that's a whole other issue on its own. So many Pasifika women are getting charged and put into prison for benefit fraud and for crime that they've committed just because they don't have the means to be able to survive. So, like I said, it's just a couple of the things that I'm touching base on now. I don't want to over talk. I've only got 8 minutes, so I'm going to try to still keep to the basics. After all of that, then we end up, for those that are in relationships, that can get really abusive. So that's when the violence comes in. See what poverty does. And it's all connected. Everything is all connected. So what women want, to answer the question and the whole purpose of why I'm here tonight, what Pasifika and women on benefit want is practically the same. We want to be able to pay our rent, live each week with dignity. We want to be able to give our kids the best education that we can. But with the benefit levels that we're receiving at the moment and the wages that we get, it's absolutely impossible. So we want the government to raise the benefit levels to a livable income. We also want the minimum wage to be raised for all women. mean all women and for all beneficiaries. We also want the justice system to start treating us Pacifica women fairly, especially women on benefit as well, and start criminalising us for the things that we do to survive. We're all human, you know, and without mothers, honestly, without women in this, I don't think this country will be able to survive. And so with that, I'd just like to, you know, leave on a positive note, and also just to say thank you for all being here tonight. Thank you for the opportunity for letting me speak tonight as well, and I wish you all a great night. And please, all I ask is that you vote for what's right. We want to see the kids in our community and the women of our society and our communities to thrive. Okay. Thank you.
Questions to her colleague Laurie Magnus. Where are you, Laurie? Well, we'll bring Laurie up a little bit later. But thank you for that wonderful corridor. And thank you for bringing a note of positivity as well. I think there was a lot to look forward to, as well as there's a lot of concerns in your community. So that was a brilliant balance that you all have done. Right. With us next to Korero with you, Merrin Lawler is here on the empowerment of survivors of family violence. Merrin is the Kaiarahi and National Advocate for Te Kupenga Whakaoti Mahi Pātana, the National Network of Family Violence Services. Merrin came to Aotearoa 12 years ago from my homeland, from Naarm, also known as Melbourne, on the lands of the Kulin Nation. She is a former lawyer who worked exclusively in community legal centres. Merrin was the coordinator at Living Without Violence Waiheke Island for 5 years before taking on her current role. Thank you so much for your mahi, Merrin, and the microphone is yours.
I'll probably just echo the sentiments of all of the speakers in terms of that, how delighted I am to be able to present tonight, and my personal acknowledgement to the Auckland Women's Centre for hosting this and allowing not just the opportunity for us to speak at you, but for you to ask questions and engage in a discussion. I've got notes because I ended up being told that I had 8 minutes, and I thought maybe 8 hours would be more appropriate. So I had to bullet point with what I'm proposing to say. So the question is, what do women, victims, survivors of family violence want from the next government? They want exactly what they've been asking every previous government for. And to amplify that, there have been, over the last 30 years, something in the order of 27 reports arising from inquiries, parliamentary committees, private inquiries like the Glen Inquiry, that were all intended to bring together some notion of what needs to change in the system as it relates to family violence, to be more responsive to and accountable to the victims, survivors of family violence. And so what we actually have are something like 27 reports that chronicle exactly the same thing 27 times. And each of those reports gives voice to the voices of women survivors of family violence. So the first thing that women survivors need is for governments to actively listen, but also actively believe. So we need them to actually listen to the stories, not through the consultations where they say, very interesting, and file it away as some sort of recommendation, but to actually listen and to value what they've heard in terms of believing the content of it. And that's at both the micro level, when a woman talks about her experience of family violence, believing her story, affirming her story, but also at that macro level, when victim survivors say they need these sorts of services delivered in this way, believe them. So that's the first thing that we need government to do, is to actually believe women. And you know, in doing that, we also need government to stump up. And that is to stump up, and rather than continually asking women to speak into this space, is to ensure that those who hold that sacred space that women speak into, and I want to acknowledge Deb and the Backbone Collective for the work that they've done in this, holding that space and doing it on the smell of an oily rag and a lot of volunteer time and next to no government funding. What we don't need in that context is a government coming in that says, oh, we've got great ideas and we want to have a new plan, a new framework, a new strategy. We've seen that successive governments have provided that. What we actually need is a government that is prepared to be brave in moving forward. And that's brave in moving forward with concrete changes. So there's been a lot of work done over the last 5 years, 5 to 6 years, around developing a national strategy. We can at various terms say it's a wonderful document, or it's a document that's full of motherhood statements and nice thoughts, but we need some content to it. The next government has to deliver content. And in that context, one of the key pieces of content that they must deliver is a process of taking responsibility for managing risk. Some of you may have read a really insightful article by Associate Professor Carrie Leonetti, published on Newsroom, which was reflecting back on the events, the terrible events in downtown Auckland of last week. And one of the points that she made is that in this country there is no validated, independent risk assessment process. And the reason for that is that it's because we expect victim survivors to manage the risk. And it provides an easy out for every part of the system to say, well, has she got a safety plan? If she's got a safety plan, we really don't need to be doing anything more. So in order to move further or to advance the interests of victim survivors, we need government to remove from them the burden that they carry of managing risk. We need a government that's brave. And when I say brave, I mean being prepared to acknowledge that the system that they administer is a system of abuse. That women, when they step out of their home and the violence of the relationship, are stepping into a system that can be as abusive, certainly as traumatising and re-traumatising as the abuse they face at home. And they are made to make a choice, and it's not a real choice. They're made to make a choice. And the choice is, do I stay within this violent relationship where I at least know how to manage it? Or do I go out into the system where I don't know how to manage it? And frankly, any system that requires you to have a navigator is way too complex a system to be working with people. Lots and other point that I will make is that what women need are practical interventions. They need independent advocacy. They need to have the opportunities to determine what they need to move forward. Deb and I were talking yesterday about an initiative in Victoria, Australia, where every woman gets access to a $10,000 grant or funding pool that she can spend however she feels is appropriate. And ultimately, what victim survivors need is the recognition that violence and the impacts of violence go on, and the support therefore needs to be there for as long and whenever it is needed.
Thank you, Mary. Scribbling madly. I've got lots of questions on that, in particular area of interest for me. All right. Next up, I'm thrilled to have with us Professor Jennifer Curtin, the Director of Public Policy Institute at the University of Auckland. If she could get herself out from behind the table there. Jennifer researches Australian and New Zealand politics and policy, gender policy analysis and political leadership, and the politics of sport, including gender-responsive budgeting in New Zealand and the gendered effects of COVID-19. She has also served on the Haui Advisory Board, New Zealand Family Violence Clearinghouse, but today she's going to be talking to us about what women and other carers, the dependent children, need from this budget and this next government.
Thank you to everyone for being here, to my esteemed panellists, and to the Auckland Women's Centre for organising this and for inviting me along. So I'm a bit of a nerd, you can tell, right? Also, I would say that I'm not speaking, I am a mother of two grown-up boys. The feminists must have sons. That's why I'm not told. But what I wanted to do is give a bit more of a macro perspective rather than prescribe what mothers and carers need, and keep it at the level of women as voters, and then what women wanted from 2020, and then you can assess whether we got what we wanted. And then what I personally see is what some of the key issues might be that we might want to, in our various ways, fight for in this coming election, which is very much filled up with male leaders, which contrasts quite significantly to several past elections. So, next slide please. I'm going big picture first. This is from the New Zealand Election Study, and this is the gender gap in voting behaviour. It's got 3,300 randomly, blah, 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 survey people, that kind of mathematical quant stuff. But what I wanted to highlight for you, which is not so much the gender gap between those who vote for National and those who vote for Labour, but I wanted to show you the women's vote. So if you look at what's happening here with the sort of, it's supposed to be orange because it was neutral, I thought, but it's coming out pink. In 1999, there's quite a big gap between women who vote for National and women who vote for Labour, and that's the election that Helen Clark wins. I think we can't dismiss women's political leadership, even if they mask their feminism in the process of leading for various reasons. 2002, 19% of our respondents said they voted National compared to 44% women. And then 2005, which I think is an interesting one, because that's the one that followed the Ori Whisper know what kinds of issues are being discussed, and in a very wedge politics, hate-filled kind of way this election. And so we know that historically at least, women voters have resisted that to some extent, but party identification still matters in that election. So hopefully that won't be repeated. Then in 2011 we see John Key doing a marvellous job at winning women voters back to national. But starts to lose them again in 2014. But in 2014 we also see a significant percentage of our respondents voting for non-major parties. And that can be really critical, as we know, for who's going to be coalition partners. And so, but that again doesn't stay. What I think is really interesting about 2017 is, even though it's a close run thing in terms of where women stand, again we see as voters they like the smaller parties, but the COVID election becomes quite an anathema to the historical way in which we tend to see New Zealand voters go. So we can't use 2020 as a baseline for anything, in the sense. What we want to do is push the reset button for 2023. So next slide, the numbers in our survey are very small when it comes to the smaller parties. But what we do know from the numbers we have is that women are less likely than men to support ACT. They're also less likely to vote for New Zealand First. They're more likely to rank health and social policy issues higher than female counterparts. That the Greens vote is relatively even, but over time what we really know is that there is now a Green vote base. Like there are base voters in the way that the two major parties think about their base, and this is really important for maintenance of position inside Parliament that needs a 5% threshold. The Māori Party in 2020 also was relatively even in terms of its vote share from men and women. But research tells us that women parliamentarians are more likely, progressive women leaders and women's voting patterns tend to track alongside each other, but I wouldn't want to say that it's causal. Okay, just put that there. But research does tell us that more women parliamentarians, unfortunately in New Zealand, is correlated with when we make 50% when parties at the centre and centre-left win enough seats. We will probably see, if there's a centre-right coalition, a drop well below 50% this time round. But the research tells us that women on both sides of the House, or all sides of the House, are more likely to raise questions of women's wellbeing in Parliament than their male colleagues. And so we maybe need to be thinking about who those women list MPs are, as well as women elected MPs, and thinking about what and reading first speeches, maiden speeches, is a really interesting way of finding out what our politicians' base values or core values are if we want to target them for certain kinds of campaigns. And there's some diversity across age groups. So I'll jump across now to the next slide, please. So what do we think in terms of policy, given that we know that women voters care a lot about social policy, health policy? What we do know is, and this is a guesstimate, that somewhere between 65 and 70% of women voters are mothers. That's quite a sizable percentage of the voting population, who undertake majority of paid and unpaid care work, that's evidence-based, which is undervalued. They sit on lower incomes, so we've got pay equity, sexual and intra-organisational segregation, sorry about the blur, but that's just basically, we work in sectors that tend to do the care work, and we also tend to be at the bottom or the middle of both organisations. So we're dealing with vertical and horizontal segregation that impacts lower our incomes. And of course, KiwiSaver. So we've seen all the evidence from the latest report, and you and Susan St John's in the audience who knows everything about child poverty and about KiwiSaver and National Super, so I'll handle questions to you about that. I would argue that the undervaluing is also demonstrated by lower investment in care work, and both paid and unpaid. So we see higher underutilisation rates in terms of labour force participation, than compared to men. We see a very narrow conception of infrastructure by both sides of politics, when we should be disaggregating that into social infrastructure and physical infrastructure. So investing in the care economy, which actually has, feminist economists have shown, has just as high impact on growth and GDP as does building more houses that we need, but it's not one or the other, right? There is importance around parenting, parental leave, childcare and the gap. You know, we're still not seeing childcare subsidisation for all kids under school age, right? We've still got a gap where we stay at home and look after them ourselves, so we've cobbled together enough money for childcare. KiwiSaver, again, sorry, I'm hammering that one. And then there's missing measures of wellbeing. We haven't had a time use survey to measure women's unpaid work since 2009. And every time we raise it, because the census has been a mess, we don't get it. So we've just got to keep labouring that one. And I really would like to see some more data on inter-family income distribution, because thinking about the household income survey and just defaulting to household as if somehow that's all shared nicely is a problem. And just to remember that penalty effects accumulated. So when it starts young, it carries on and we just fall further and further behind. So I'll just show you the next slide and then I'll stop. That one is from, if you want this, it's on the website. The Gender Justice Collective did this big survey last election and then put our gender scorecard on which party. So we're going to try and redo that for this election. And the last slide is, what do we need to focus on? Yes. Okay, maintaining national super at the eligibility age of 65. Sorry, we have to do this. I don't know if Susan, yeah? But this is really, 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 really important. And raising it to 67 or something else is not going to save us that much money. So why don't we just look after our example that is globally recognised to be a small version of a universal basic income. Why would we mess with that? Support our pay equity claims and pay transparency campaigns, because I heard, oh no, I can't say that because I'll get told off. We need to increase childcare subsidies, increase funding for services connected to women's health. So National's really good at changing legislation and they're not very good at putting money into the things that are needed. So retain the Ministry for Women because ACT wants to dump it. Gender impact assessments and the gender budgeting pilot that we got up this election and this budget, and I can talk more about that later. And we need to start counting women. Not just on the things that we do naturally in our that they think we do naturally in our care life, our lives as carers, but we need to think about the fact that very few policy issues, if any, are gender neutral, which means natural disasters, climate change, public transport options and research and development all need a gender lens. Thank you very much.
And last but certainly never ever least, for her expert opinion on what's needed to secure the rights of disabled women, we have the inimitable Dr. Who, Dr. Ngāti Kāhinga and Tainui descent. Huhana is a lawyer and disability advocate whose many responsibilities and forte include serving on the board of Odyssey House, being an expert advisor on Housing for Human Rights Commission, and serving on the Human Rights Review Tribunal panel for the Ministry of Justice. All fantastic, Marty. Lovely to see you.
Yes, sir. I'm loud enough anyway. Short briefer and he was there from years ago. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Ko hurana Manawātia Matariki, as we leave. I just want to acknowledge all those who have passed in the last 12 months. I'm sure we've all got somebody we remember. And as we head into the new year and the new season, let us remember we're about to have new beginnings for Aotearoa. And that includes an election that I really don't want to go to. I actually don't want to be there. I I would really like to vote now and just have it over and done with, but I'm terrified for it. And why? Because as a disabled woman, I can tell you now, we're already struggling. If we come in under a government that's going to take away our ministry, that's brand new, like our, if it takes away our benefits, takes away our housing rights, we've barely got them anyway, and 3% of all housing in Aotearoa is accessible, and we have 25% of the population. There's a whole bunch of things. So I tend to be a bit more intersectorial. These ladies, they can have their little label and compartments, but we cross all of those. Because we're mothers, we're grandmothers, we experience violence at a much higher rate, we're unemployed at a much higher rate, we want the same things. And I remember the Me Too movement when that came out, and I remember going and watching. I didn't see one disabled woman speaking. I remember going to the suffragette event that we had in Aotearoa Square, the big one, and I remember sitting there thinking, well, I know my other women didn't ever vote at the same time that the Pākehā women got it. And then I was thinking, well, who were the disabled and suffragettes? And there were disabled suffragettes. Not one disabled woman was invited to be a part of all the speak at that major event. We're not included. We are an extra to the whole debate. If you want to talk about, data and all of that, for the COVID research, I was a lead researcher on disability. Ministry of Health refused any death data around how many disabled died of COVID. They don't collect them. They collect Māori, they collect Pacifica, they collect women, men, children, ages, all the other data, but not about how many disabled have died. We actually have eugenics in Aotearoa right now. Something I thought I'd never see again. And as a law student, under the human rights model, because that's what I was passionate about, eugenics we talked about in the past. It's in the present. The moment that they get it ripped with Omicron, they applied eugenics. And I say that not lightly. I nearly died last year with COVID. I got COVID-induced pneumonitis. We did all the precautions. We masked 2 weeks before my mate had to go in for surgery. I was at the hospital, masked the entire time. I went home. My mate stayed overnight. She got COVID by the visitors that were masked in that ward. Came home, gave it to me because she had the cat. We had everything separated, but the bloody cat would come and visit me and gave me COVID. I'm the one that ended up in hospital. I was the innocent party here. But as a result, it showed me just exactly how our health policy is not benefiting disabled people. I'm now so scared. I'm a frequent flyer at the hospital. I'm so scared of Middlemore. And I'm still on the clinical governance group. I'm on the consumer guarantees group, coalition. I'm on multiple groups with Te Whatu Ora, Te Awha Whaiora, and yet I'm terrified of going into A&E because they will kill me. Even my doctor's trying to do all my treatments at home rather than hospital because it's not safe. Now that's for disabled people. We were told to get over it, move on, pandemic's over. Some of us are so immunocompromised that I could die if I'm in a room full of COVID people. Hence why I had that there. And I will die. I was told by my doctor, the next bout of COVID, if I get it, I will be dead. There's no two ways about it. And I accept that. I know my risks, so I balance around that. But what I also know is that people in Aotearoa don't care about us anymore. They haven't cared about us since Omicron went through. Let's move on. It's your problem, not mine. And I've watched people die that had avoidability in that, but they died because they were at risk. And that's what we've got in Aotearoa now. For our election this year, disabled, we just want everything you guys want. We want access to housing that's accessible. They didn't reappoint me from Housing New Zealand to claim order because I was too successful. I got the first disability plan in place, and I got the first commitment to a strategic agreement we wanted 100%, they gave us 15. They haven't even started yet. Their plans are appalling. So what we actually have is when they do think about us, they get it wrong because they don't engage with us. Whaikaha, the new ministry, fantastic. We didn't actually ask for a ministry. It was me that did the hikoi to Wellington. I called it the hikoi of hope. I didn't want a negative protest. I wanted a positive one. And so Laurie was with us and a whole bunch of us disabled went to Parliament. And the only MP that stood with us that entire time was Jan Logie. The only one. And she's leaving us. All the others came and went. I had stories, I had photographs, I had petition signatures. I had a friend who's a lawyer who said that Cabinet told her, someone in Cabinet told her, that the only way disabled will get anything is if they're forced to give it to us. So after that heckling, a new ministry was announced. They've underfunded it. They bullied all the disabled out of the partnership board. It is now parents and providers taking over again. So we've got a ministry, but we've got a long way to go before disabled are a part of that. And this is the problem we have in our country. For the domestic violence stuff, when I was Heather Henare was the CEO back then, I remember challenging them at a symposium right here years ago. Where are the accessible emergency houses? Where can a disabled person go who's got a non-disabled son or a disabled son when boys are not allowed after a certain age? Where can a disabled woman go who needs caregivers when the caregivers are not allowed in the refuge? Where can we go with our service animals, like my service dog, if my dog is not allowed? I'm a survivor of domestic violence. It was a woman, my ex-partner, beat me in 1996 unconscious. And yet our law does not reflect same-sex violence. Our law does not reflect what to do around disabled people when it happens. I had to go in to one whare when I was at the community law centre at Auckland Disability Law, and this woman they knew was being abused by the husband, but the only way I could go in was to pretend they'd just been diagnosed with her condition. And I would go in and ask certain questions and stuff that wasn't there, and I was able to ascertain if she'd been abused or not. I have had to represent 20 disabled prisoners. I got them all out. Only one was reoffended. Several of them I would question the guilt. It all comes down to good representation, and if you haven't got money, you don't get good representation. They were all Māori, by the way. All of them are now living a good life because I put a release plan in place upon their release, so they couldn't get out of it. They got rehab, housing, therapy, the whole family, and only one was reoffended in 20 years. There's so much around disability, but the main message I'll leave you with is stop hiding us, stop devaluing us, stop telling me that I'm suffering and I should go for euthanasia. You know, stop telling me to kill myself because I was advocating against it, because there wasn't enough protection for disabled people in that model. And just recently in the state of Victoria, they euthanised a 24-year-old with Alice Daniels. I had many friends with that. In Canada, they euthanised a woman last year because she couldn't get housing. So she asked to be euthanised because she can't get accessible housing. They euthanised her. They are denying caregiving support to people in Canada that are disabled and offering them euthanasia. I'm not against euthanasia personally, but what I want to see is proper protections. Our next government needs to put front and centre what you're going to do that will include disabled in every single element of our lives. And that's every single topic that sits up here, not just in the disability. We don't sit separate, we sit with all of them. Thank you.
Some of us on the panel here might feel a bit reluctant You talked about being brave. What are the kind of changes that we need to see? And please do just pass the microphone up and down to whoever I go to. What kind of changes in either policy or legislation do we need to achieve? Do we need to achieve that bravery?
I think that there's a range of changes that need to occur, particularly in legislation. But one of the really brave changes that I'm not convinced that any party is yet prepared to do is to turn the family violence system on its head and to have victims, survivors at the heart, but the perpetrator as the focus. I come from Australia. We tend to be a little bit more brash in Australia, and it always surprises me the sort of messages that we give about family violence in this country. Ram raiding is not okay. Burglary is not okay. Actually, they're crimes. Let's call them what they are. Family violence is a crime.
Kia ora.
And until we can actually begin to grapple with that and have government that is brave enough to say, it's not about penalising, criminalising, because we know the impact that that's going to have, which is an impact on the most marginalised of communities. But it's about recognising that there is an element of the whole domestic violence sphere that we tread around because, well, we don't want to offend men.
No, I don't know either.
I don't know. But
You get used to it after a while, eh?
But it's a system made by and for men. And we then layer into that an expectation that it should be a system that protects and supports survivors. But it's within that system that is designed by and for men.
So I want to actually get into that by giving you an example that popped into my inbox today. You talked about victim survivors having to carry the burden of managing the risk to keep themselves and their whānau safe. So today I got an email from a friend of a woman who has just left a violent relationship. She wasn't able to get help from either of the refuges. She contacted, I think she falls into a little black spot on the north shore of Tamaki Makaurau. She's managed to get a... Pardon? She has managed to get a police safety order, which is kind of a partial solution for her. But she has been told that to get a protection order, she will need to hire a lawyer. She's just out of the frame where she can get legal aid support, and she doesn't earn very much, $67,000 a year. She can't get legal aid. She doesn't have the $7,000 that she needs to hire a lawyer. And I'm a journalist. These people are emailing me saying, "What should I do?" They almost lose sight of the fact that I'm there to write stories. What I generally do in these cases is try and repurpose an affidavit that I keep on my desktop. That perhaps the friend can go to the court, pick up the forms that she needs. We can help her fill in the affidavit, and she can file the bloody thing herself because she simply doesn't have the money. This is a very long example, but it's a great example of somebody having to manage the risk. How do we fix that? What is the policy and the legislation that fixes that?
And I guess, at one level we can say that the policy is more money, which means that every politician will go, "Oh, no, let's talk about something else." But it is partly that. It's about more money for all the services that need to be there to alleviate the burden of risk. But a lot of it is around legislation and just the systems that we have in place. Again, coming from Australia, I'm always amazed that the bulk of protection orders that are made in Australia or intervention orders are on the application of police. So a woman only needs to say to the police, I want a protection order, and the police will apply for it. And they will advocate for her in court. She can be there, but she doesn't need to run that process. That's what the system should be about. It should be about saying, whatever you need, we can obtain for you. Not, this is what you need, now go and use it.
Thank you, Kia ora. So we touched on feelings of disappointment and perhaps the need to be brave. From your, getting down to the nitty-gritty, from your perspective, what promises have been made from which parties that would go some way to addressing the needs of young mothers and fathers with care?
So I think just one little statement before I answer that. Although we've all talked about our individual kaupapa, there are so many links, and certainly whānau violence is one that we struggle with in our community of young parents. Housing also stops our young whānau from leaving their partners, because actually driving hapu and young and knocking on the door of a housing provider, often they say no, you're hapu, we don't take pregnant mums. So actually a lot of the issues that our young parents are dealing with relate to some of the issues talked about across the panel. And we do need some bold, policy changes. And so far, for us, and I'm thinking about one of our mamas at the moment who we have just hired. She has looked at many of the policies, and she's talked to many of our mama. And for them, her belief is that Greens will make the difference. So I was a little bit reluctant to say that before, but the reality is this is the voice of our mamas. They've looked at our policies, they've listened to the kōrero from politicians. Greens have been knocking on our doors wanting to talk to the mum even before elections. They feel like Greens have answers unlike other parties. Maybe that's because of the boldness that's often spoken to by some of the leaders that really inspire our mama. And I'm sure there's other parties that have solutions too. But I think the thirst for some real big changes, some bold flipping of the things that we've got on, that our young mama feel like it's the Greens currently.
Laura, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Staying on that kind of thread, I'm not shy to say that one of the most shocking things I have seen recently is the ruling out of the wealth tax. That really, an absolute gut punch and a massive disappointment. I can hardly, I've read a lot about it and I can hardly believe it. We've seen the fuel subsidy removed recently, and what was the other one, the public transport subsidy. How do we hold up our whānau who are finding cost of living, let's talk about housing, which is a massive, rents a massive part of people's income. How do we solve this? Who is more likely to make a difference?
Yeah. Well, I have to go and Triple AP, I know, go with the Greens as well. And it's the only one ones we trust to walk the talk, really. And personally, I think that we need a coalition, a coalition government. So, yes, I think, what do we do? What's the answer? You know, I know what AAAP does, and we've been doing it for years, and like so many groups, it's like existing on the snow and oil rag, and AAAP will not take government funding. We're never taking government funding, and we just don't want to be compromised, and some of the parties that hopefully don't get in definitely compromise our organisations. So we need good allies. We need people to come along and volunteer and help the people, support them, to deal with the organisations like WINS. So at least you can help people put food on the table at night for their kids. The other thing we need is that on the 19th of August, some of you may know, there's going to be a rally in the city. Tax the Rich is the campaign name, and it's to bring back the on the table the wealth tax and the capital gains tax. I'm actually another Aussie. But I must tell you clearly that I am a West Australian. I'm not an Australian. West Australians are not Australians. And
Queenslanders.
I knew that. Probably most of Australia, but with us they just don't know it yet. So, you know, things like capital gains tax, there are tax systems that have been in place where I come from forever, really. I do not understand, like, things they get away with in this country. I don't get it. I don't get how people who are wealthy pay half the tax that we pay. That just doesn't make any sense, and yet we better keep going on. So I hope everybody, all your friends, all people that you work with, the organisations, come to the rally, support it, make it really clear that this has got to be on the table and we need a fairer system. Why do they get to get away with that when in South Auckland, West Auckland, God, in the building I live in the CBD, I know there are people that are not eating tonight. It just isn't good enough.
Thank you. Professor Curtin, another thing I'm disappointed about, not a full of it tonight, despite the fact that there have been promises for quite some time now, we still have no sign of legislation on mandated pay transparency. Despite massive, I think, support for it in the community in Aotearoa. I don't even know what my question is here, but are we confident that mandated pay transparency, we're not going to see it this term, I don't think, but perhaps we can hope for next term, is that going to make a difference, particularly for Māori and Pacifica Wahine?
Sure, for the question. I get really nervous about legislation, to be honest. So some of you will remember the pay equity legislation we got in 1989-1990, and Margaret Wilson doing so much work before then to get that up, and it lasted 6 months. When National got elected, it was the first piece of legislation that they ditched before they introduced the Employment Contracts Act. And I would and so on. I mean, my PhD was on trade unions in 4 countries, and to be honest, I still think some kind of collective wage bargaining and it's really important, and it might not be centralised anymore, and unions might not be sexy anymore, but we need to be educating the younger generation about community solidarity, and you know, that's a really important mechanism, I think, for ensuring that pay, like closing gender pay gaps and ethnic pay gaps and indigenous pay gaps, is all about the strength of the workers who have the power to share the benefits from their positional power with those who don't have it. So I feel like pay transparency is quite an individual solution, and I'm not missing it. I just think what it means is we have to have lots of different options, because the labour force is really diverse, and so pay transparency won't work for a lot of workers. So, and can I just say that the reason why our system is really unfair is the fourth Labour government, because as soon as we got DST and mooting of a flat tax, politicisation of a more equitable tax system just went out the window. And so, you know, I can't draw a line in the sand and tell you who I'm going to vote for, because that would be unprofessional of me. But I would say I think it's ironic that David Parker is resigning as Revenue Minister, because neither a wealth tax nor a capital gains tax is being supported by his party. However, I would also say it is political suicide for a major party to run on tax. And so maybe they will be brave. A centre-left coalition with Te Pāti Māori and the Greens might be brave enough to do a capital gains tax, because, you know, that's unproductive labour, those gains, right? The rest of us are working, and that's unproductive labour providing profit that we should be taxing. So, I think it doesn't answer the question.
No, Greens MP on the radio this morning suggests that David Parker could always party like that. Even though he says, you know, of course he says he's a loyal member of the Labour Party. One more question for you, Professor Curtin. I spent the last couple of years on the National Advisory Council for the Employment of Women, and one of the things that we were pushing, strongly advising the ministry and the minister was that all policy and legislation should have a gender lens put across it, and actually I would add a disability lens to that 100%. It didn't happen, probably because the ministry is chronically underfunded. How important is that from your viewpoint as an academic? How important is it for a gender lens to run across everything the government does? Because it's not at the moment.
So I would say for the bureaucracy, it's challenging to add an intersectional lens without it sounding additive. So let's be a Tariki analysis, and here became, Jack Kidd, Dominic O'Sullivan's work is really important in this space. And as Māori as foundational group, I would say they need to be, we do that, and gender lens that's intersectional or intersectional gender. So that's the first thing. I would say that the ministry has behind the scenes been doing some really important work, designing Bringing Gender In tool that's available online. You can all go look at it. And they're just doing a refresh of that. And they ran a very quiet pilot gender responsive budgeting initiative, the budget before last, where they required 5 programs provide a gender lens as part of their budget bits, so on new spend, not existing spend, and that went pretty well. They designed a support package of work and training to those agencies and programs to help with that work. Then this year, they rolled it out to 27 initiatives that were required. They were told what to bid for, and they were told them to do a gender analysis. Various degrees of capacity and gender expertise, obviously some training, but in the end, of the 300 budget initiatives that were funded in this last budget, 100 of them had a gender lens put across them. So a ministry of 35 people and a gender budgeting team of about 2 worked with Treasury and line agencies to make that happen. That is a very tiny initiative that's really important. But what we don't want to do, in my view, is shout it from the rooftops. We want to make sure it's in the statements to the incoming government. We want to make sure it's just business as usual. It's not a big deal. And, the ministry doesn't need any more resource to do it because it's a process issue, it's not a spend issue. And if that starts to happen and it gets embedded in the agencies out there doing the spend, then we've got to win. But we just don't want them to know, the centre right to know about it, because otherwise they'll squash it. So we've just got to turn down the volume on it and just know that we have it.
Tactical, I like it. Well, that COVID risk is a slippery thing, isn't it? It's not, it's almost just been like a default choice that has been driven from, from a sense around the world that we're over it. I don't pretend actually to understand how that decision has been made, but from your perspective and from the people that you represent, how on earth do we deal with that?
It's a hard one, because I was so proud of our country. 2020, the lockdowns and that, we were collected. I managed to get Kainui, my cousin who was going through chemo at the time, was handing out food parcels and everything else. I was getting elderly in wheelchairs that had been starving for 3 weeks on rice and noodles, and we were able to give them, pie and stuff because families were ringing so they couldn't go to them. I was able to advocate. I had a mother ring me in panic because the hospital were going to kick her out while her daughter was there because an immune-compromised daughter was being treated by a nurse who wasn't masked, not gloved, trying to take bloods, and she was coughing over the daughter who was immune-compromised. I guess I'm not afraid of anybody. I rang Carmel. I don't wait for them to respond. She told me, wrong office, contact Jenny. So I rang Jenny Solisa. We had an hour's conversation. Then I got hold of Audrey, the Deputy Director of Disabilities. She told me that apparently she nearly lost her job over me. I don't care. I had a daughter and a mother that were in, she was panicking. So I told her, tell the matron that you're talking to your lawyer, and just put a bit of fear of God into them. And they did, and we resolved it. But I was getting calls like this left, right, and centre. I was getting people that were homeless. My wife and I, we've been doing backpacks for the homeless for a number of years. We fill it with protein, food, clothing, medicines, razors, all that sort of stuff. And we just do it out of our benefit. And we can't afford to do it anymore because the cost of living is too high. But the number of homeless out there that were just struggling to find somewhere safe was really hard. And, that's the problem we've got. It's very difficult, but it's funny that it's the Western world that's been allowed as leaders around masks and individual rights. You go to places like Japan, you go to China, they wear masks because they're used to pandemics. 1892 we had a major pandemic here in Aotearoa. 1918 we had, of course, the Spanish flu pandemic, which didn't start in Spain. I'll say it started in America when I think about it, in Texas. Those Americans, they always do everything wrong. But what we needed to do is we needed to grab that collectivity. We needed to grab what they learned, and they know that viruses mean death, so they mask. We're getting the message of individual rights, and the problem with that is people do have the right to say no to being vaccinated, and even though I'm pro-vaccine, I would fight for anyone that approached me and said, I don't want to be vaccinated, because they have the right to say no. But they also have to bear the consequence of that decision. And the problem we've got, we have a society, a Western society today, where we teach people about individual rights, and I'm a human rights lawyer, I'm up for it, but there's also a thing called collective rights and responsibilities, and Indigenous people know that. And in fact, that's how we operate. We have our individual rights, but if my marae call me home, I go home, and I don't argue with any of the Koreans or the Kaumatua because they're the boss. And that's how we operate. Western society also now we've seen not the Ebola virus, but another hemorrhagic disease spreading, now coming into Western countries. We've seen that monkeypox virus coming out. We're seeing more and more of this because we've forgotten about what we're doing with our own. We've forgotten about nature. We've forgotten about what goes on in the world. We don't look after the environment. We don't look after ourselves. Look at Greece at the moment. Look at Spain. Look at what's going on around the world. If we don't, in New Zealand, we were leading the way. And I have to say, I know Jacinda quite well. Every time we were in the quarter lounge of Red Meeting, we chat for a few minutes. But I have to say, we had one of the best leaders we've had in a long time, and we destroyed her. We broke her. We've broken our wahine. And she provided a way forward that no one else was able to provide in the world, and led with common sense and care for each other. But we had short teachers then. We're used to the movies that say that someone's going to come and rescue us, and we'll come right and we'll come back together. But one day that movie, and I think the most real movie in that time was Don't Look Up. That comedy, and it was so real because by not looking up, by not looking at what the risks are, we're actually killing ourselves. And we need to do it now. I've got two beautiful sons, lesbian mama here, but I raised them to love and respect everyone. And I have two beautiful grandsons, same thing, teach them to respect. And it's their future. It's not my future. It's theirs. And it's not going to be a future if we don't look after it now. How can we resolve this? We need to get back to our collective caring for each other. Aotearoa New Zealand has one of the most beautiful ability to bring each other together. We're a small country. We've got the beauty of being isolated. If there's a nuclear war in Ukraine and Russia, we'll survive. It's going to be rough, but we've got a better chance of surviving than other parts of the world. We could lead the way financially, economically. If we were to take hemp, for instance, it's a biofuel, it's a food, it's a building material, it's a medicine. If we were to lead the way and get innovative, but we're afraid. We get trapped into this little thing of, I'll go with what I know and what I don't know. And I'll go back to Ganesh Nana, and when I was working with him on the Welfare Student Advisory Group with a bunch of wonderful guys and girls, and they made some we costed it. We could provide a universal benefit now that would reduce the, that poverty that our young mothers have, our young people have, and disabled and many others. But they got afraid. They hadn't implemented the WEAG report. Why did they petition us for 5 years ago now? And it's not being implemented. We could have dealt with relationship issues. We could have dealt with poverty. We could have done a whole lot of things. And it would have been costed fine. We need the CGT and the wealth taxes. There's no other two ways about it. And we've got to stop being afraid to say it. We've got to stand up. This year I'll again be starting a campaign called Vote Crip the Vote 2024. People hate that word, crip, but that's the whole point of using it. And we're going to criticise, because the other thing that's missing is there's no one with disabilities sitting in Parliament. And we need that, because we've got nobody representing us. I have to rely on all these fellas and fellasses. And, they're failing us. You're failing us. You're failing disabled. You're failing unsafe Māori. You're failing unsafe Pacifica, our own country. You're failing, we've got nowhere can we go as seniors and being disabled. All we're told is go to restaurants. I ain't going to one of those shows. I'd rather stay at home. I'll force my son to give
We're just coming up to the break, but I do want to ask you all, and I'm going to open this to the entire panel, something really important. It'll have to be quick. If you've got an answer, your answer may be God only knows. Obviously, we have seen an erosion of women's rights overseas, particularly in the United States. Pardon? Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, exactly. And Iran, and it's terrifying. Jacinda Ardern exited her job with an incredible amount of misogynist vitriol. I still believe she was driven out by that, even though she says she wasn't. How optimistic are we about women's rights, or at least retaining what we've got? Because the real danger is that we're going to
actually, at the beginning of 1993. We had far more rights as women then. Today it's dangerous. I actually had to get security cameras on because I was threatened 3 months ago when someone tried to do an extortion attempt with a really disgusting lie, and the police are involved. But this is the story. We're told to kill ourselves regularly. I had to help 2 of the disabled women that were standing up against euthanasia because they were getting death threats. They were told you're a waste. We're wasting money on you people. And during the pandemic, disabled were being told that we're a waste of our health dollar and we should sacrifice ourselves for the non-disabled. I ain't sacrificing myself for any of them. You can do it for me first. And that's the problem we have, is women are not being respected globally, not just in Aotearoa. And until we change that, and how do we do that? When the misogyny is getting worse, not just against the Prime Minister, but look what happened this week, and look at who's getting targeted, and it's Wahine. It's not our men, it's our women. And we need to try and stand up for that, otherwise it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Anybody else have a response to that?
I agree with what you said. I think things have got worse in my lifetime. I have been involved with domestic violence. I hate the term family violence. As a disabled woman, we try to stop that from happening. We have domestic households that have nothing to do with family. So I hope we get that to turn back. But I spent a lifetime from the womb involved in domestic violence. And getting old enough to try and change that, to work with that, watching it just get worse and worse. And what I've come to realise is that we live in a system that has a huge investment in domestic violence. And that as women, we raise the sons that become part of the military, of the war industry. There's something really wrong and we're missing a link. And I think it's like looking at how we raise these boys, and they think that, I didn't raise my son that way, I must say. I said the only thing I couldn't forgive is if my children joined the military and thought it was all right to go off and kill some other women's children. And I meant it, and I mean it now. They never joined the military. And I'm grateful for that. I think that there's this thing about violence that we don't realise how much, it's that unconscious bias thing. We don't realise how much we're invested in it and how it's a global situation and we're part of it. I have decided, and I did the submission for National Council of Women on the Defence Review, and I think that the Defence Review, what we called for with National Council of Women, is a Ministry of Peace and demilitarisation. Just moving all of those people in the military into jobs nationally. There's a lot of things that they do that are good, and that we could build on that, and including the overseas peacekeeping, but not any military involvement, no weapons, like totally non-violence. I don't think my life is that valuable that I would kill somebody to stay alive. It's just, why? It just doesn't make sense to me. So, I suppose what I wanted to add is that I think we need to go underneath all of it. We're constantly struggling. I set up the first women's refuge, domestic sexual violence, domestic violence and refuge in rural Western Australia. It was the second one in the whole state. That was like 40 years ago. And it's just got bigger and needs more, and somehow we are just working with the system and just kind of like a finger in the dark situation. And I think we have to think about how to find underneath, really think push control and spirit pieces.
one is to the panel in general and it's a cracker. We've just talked about this, right? Is the UBI more important than funding to support organisations, thinking about upholding the mana and autonomy of individuals versus the groups who've developed to help people navigate a white patriarchal system? It is more important. I'm a fan of the UBI.
UBI, because if we think about charities, right, when under national government working for housing to have people like Salvation Army, other church groups running housing. Now I am in the state house and I don't want a church group that's got overstressed homophobia running a church charity around housing. It should be the state. The state should be supplying housing. UBI is the same thing. But charities never ever, they have a distinction between the deserving poor and the undeserving poor. Whereas the state cannot make that distinction. And the state cannot discriminate. So I would prefer that we see a UBI, see universal housing, universal benefits that would benefit us all collectively. And we pay more taxes, more infrastructure. We then provide us, also the other issue is jobs are dying off and more people are unemployed, and it's the poor, the unskilled, the labourers. As robotics come in, as mechanics come in, inventions, we're actually losing more jobs. A UBI deals with that for those that may never ever be able to find full-time employment or the job of their dreams. It offers that bottom line and offers a little bit more. For disabled who are never in full-time employment, often in intermittent employment, we can't break out of poverty. It's really hard. So a UBI gives us that certainty of income, and then if they can earn, or like my resident, I can either sell it if it's good enough, I can earn a bit extra on top of that, but you've got your basic core funding that gives you what you need to pay your rent, your bills, and a bit of food and a little bit extra.
Sorry?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
We were talking about this in the break, and it was in relation to a comment by Christopher Luxon that invited you, all of us, around we should all be having more babies. And yes, when you look at some of his corridors, he certainly isn't willing to support more babies and our funding to raise them well. And then the lovely Alison talked about, she looked into this.
Yeah, I wrote a column on it because I was so incensed by his comment. So I wrote 800 words as I tend to do. And I did a bit of research and found there is one place in the world that has managed, there's plenty of experiments, but there's been one place in the world that has managed to lift its birth rate. And that is a province in Alberta, Canada. And they did that by introducing a UBI. That's the only thing that worked.
So there you go. Yes, definitely UBI. And why not? It's a fair way of treating all our whānau, all our community.
Would it help, particularly help your young people?
Absolutely. Because right now there is discrimination. There is stigma. There is policies around benefits that certainly are judging and actually treating them like there doesn't there. And that means that our whānau and our whānau run away and hide, don't engage with any other services because they're judged and struggling and feeling like shit, basically. And then your health suffers, then a whole lot of consequences from the fact that they're just not supported and treated with respect in our society. Good.
Maren, do you have a comment on that?
Only that I would move that and say it, for me, it can never be an either or, it has to be an and. And the reason for that is, yes, we need a universal benefit or a universal income for the very eloquent reasons already mentioned. The anxiety that I have in the either or scenario is that those know, there's certainly been a lot of discussion about this over the last couple of years, and you know, we have a range of organisations that work in the family violence space that ostensibly provide training for businesses about how to ensure that your staff are safe and you know, you can get a DV tick or something like that, which is, you know, problematic in itself because it essentially creates product out of knowledge. You know, we're selling you the DV tick because you've done this with your workforce. I think that there's an enormous amount of work that can and should be being done with private businesses around their responsibilities under family violence legislation, and in particular their responsibilities about being you know, appropriate employers. We've recently been having a discussion about this notion of the disruptor, or the role of disrupting the cycles of family violence, and how beneficial it would be to have employers coming on board to disrupt, not just protect their staff who may be victim survivors, but to actually be disrupting the cycles in terms of their employees who are perpetrators of family violence.
Jennifer, when you talk about a gendered lens, do you believe that this will be inclusive and beneficial to Wāngere Māori and whānau Māori? And how?
So I think there are always issues with beginning with gender. So our Pro Vice Chancellor Māori and Pro Vice Chancellor, and our Pro Vice Chancellor Pacific, Pro Vice Chancellor Pacific identifies first as Pacific, her basis of her discrimination and her life experiences as a Pacific woman. So thinking about the gender lens, I suppose we, as a researcher, we're still, our team at the Grand New Zealand Project is still working on thinking about and working out how to decolonise gender analysis. So Leonie Hammer has written on this, and I suppose the way I've been talking about it with some of the analysts at Ministry for Women is around treaty analysis needs to sit parallel. We can't start with gender and then add Māori as treaty partners. That's our role as non-Māori to be engaging as treaty partners. So, in doing that work, so I don't think a gender lens is going to solve all the problems. I just believe that, you know, this is our third go at it since the Ministry for Women was started in 1985. We had a gender checklist, we had a set of guidelines, we had lots of training, and here we are again with it bringing gender into all online, and we've got a little window to invest in gender budgeting. But what we know from the budget guidance and so on is that Māori, Pacific, climate change, they're all priority areas as well now as women and girls. So it's, if you talk to the analysts at Ministry for Women, they are trying really hard to ensure an intersectional lens, but also the Māori policy unit within the ministry is running parallel work.
Thank you. You mentioned a couple of words there that I want to pick up on, extremely important. Climate change, how will it impact on women? And what are the political solutions that keep women in mind? That's for anybody
fellowship at the Treasury for 6 weeks in 2019 and was talking to the different groups about, how do you write women into your budget bids and your work, and I talked about this with the climate group, and they're like, there isn't a gender perspective on climate issues, and I'm like, oh, there kind of is, really, actually there's a lot of research out there. I think the other thing is, as I would say, the Climate Commission did really well on in engaging with Māori and with Te Tiriti and Whenua, but they didn't have a strong gender lens in that work. So who can afford EVs? How do we use public transport? What are the differences when natural disasters hit because of climate change? How do we support whānau and women-led families in that process? There's just so much research out there that tells us that women's lives look different. Different groups of women have different lives to different groups of men, and so, a gender-neutral approach to the kinds of community-led solutions that are required. I mean, if Wellington gets cut off, we've got to govern ourselves, and so we need to be thinking about these things as women.
Well, when you think about the exclusion for women, then think how much more exclusion for disabled, particularly disabled women. We were promised during the earthquakes that we would finally get a voice within the civil defence. Then the floods happened in March. I was up all night long, talking to a lot of our deaf community. We had Abby and some of them panicking because no one had given them sign language information that there was an emergency. So people were getting flooded out that night who were deaf. We had a tetraplegic that they evacuated without his wheelchair, and he had to stay at the police station because the hospitals and the rest homes refused to take him. So I contacted Whakaha that night, the Taupura Trust on the Hāwea, and a whole team of disabled networks and said, get on your asses tomorrow morning, I want you out there in the community and you've got to sort it. And they did. But, why do I have to tell? I'm a citizen, I'm unpaid, and I'm bloody Raki Dema. Not one minister stood for our community. Nobody stood for what we needed, and the mayor didn't even mention us. And yet many of them, I have friends that are in wheelchairs and that are homeless now, living in whatever hotels and that, and their houses are written off. And not only that, their wheelchair accessible vehicles, their wheelchairs have to all be replaced. So it's not just about women, children, it's about, actually it is, because, we're all part of that community too. But this is what happens. So climate change, the privilege of having to be non-disabled, wealthy, generally male, or cisgendered with that very strong misogynistic cis attitude, are the ones that are really creating the problems. The majority of people, male, female, whatever, non-binary, trans community, we're all just trying to survive. The decision makers are the ones holding the power and are holding us at ransom. And we have to either do what Greta Thunberg did, she got arrested yesterday, we either have to stand up, and I have to give credit to our own party for that. They stand up. Not only that, they are doing that with Julian Batchelor at the moment. It's our own party out there doing the way of the country and standing up for everything that we need to do. And as I'm in my trial, I can no longer really heckle or whatever, I'm unable to. But I'm watching our young people and I've got to support them. That's what we need to be doing. Stand behind our young waiting, our young disabled, our young whānau. Stand behind them as they forge the future, because they are the ones that future is impacted by.
Thank you. Look, I'm going to end on time because that's my job tonight. Thank you so much for your questions. Apologies to the questions that we didn't quite get to. There were a couple of others, but I haven't read them. I know that they were touched on during the general corridor, so I'm hoping that that's okay with you. You're most welcome to stay and have some refreshments, and thank you so much for participating tonight. It's lovely to see you out here, particularly on such a bitter photo night. So it's just left for me to thank once again and New Zealand Sign Language interpreters who've done such an amazing job. Thank you to the Auckland Women's Centre, and thank you, of course, to Zoe, Mary, Jennifer, Hannah and Laurie.